He had the fame, he had the money, and he had millions who adored him. To the world, he was living the dream, a Hollywood actor and chart-topping rapper who had it all. But behind the flashing lights and red carpets, something darker was festering. A secret life of paranoia, rage, and delusion that would soon spiral into an act so horrifying it left the world speechless. This is the story of the man who had everything and lost it all in the most brutal way imaginable. Welcome to Shadowed Truths. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell icon, and join our growing community of true crime lovers who seek the stories the world tries to hide. Because here, we expose the darkness one truth at a time.
8 years at this police department, we never had anything like this happen before.
Never in anybody's wildest imagination could one imagine in their own neighborhood, a quiet, nice neighborhood, that something of this magnitude could happen. I just can't even imagine.
On the morning of January 7th, 2023, the quiet of Mossy Meadow Drive in High Point, North Carolina was shattered when a famous TV star killed his entire family for a very disturbing reason. Inside the modest house at 2700 Mossy Meadow Drive, officers found the lifeless bodies of a mother and 3 of her children, each taken by gunfire in what would become one of High Point's darkest moments. Just moments earlier, 911 calls had already hinted at the nightmare to come. A terrified son said his father pointed a gun at him while 2 others escaped and begged neighbors for help. By the time police arrived, it was too late. The horror had already unfolded. The man behind the violence was Robert Creighton Jr., a Hollywood actor, once seen as a success story far removed from the troubles of High Point. But beneath that image, something dangerous had been building for years. This is the life and death of Athalia Athena Creighton and her entire family.
Hello, my name is Robert Creighton. I'm 36 years of age. I was a professional rapper. I'm an actor as well. I also do voiceovers and stand-up comedy. I look forward to working in all aspects of entertainment. I love the everyday grind of continuing to grow an entertainment business. I look forward to working with you. Once again, this is Robert Creighton. Hope you have a good day.
This story takes us to High Point, North Carolina, which sits in Guilford County, part of the Piedmont Triad region. The city is known as the furniture capital of the world, attracting buyers and designers from across the globe. However, even with its beauty, the city has struggled with crime, with residents sometimes expressing concern about safety and domestic violence cases that have drawn police attention over the years. The contrast between peaceful cul-de-sacs and moments of violence is a reality the city continues to face. And it was within this very city that Athalia's case would shatter everything, leaving even veteran officers shaken. One officer, reflecting on nearly 30 decades of service, admitted he has never seen anything like it before. Born on October 21st, 1976, Athalia Athena Creighton grew up the daughter of Joyce Veronica Farron and Anthony Thompson, both originally from Kingston, Jamaica. Her parents instilled in her the values of resilience, discipline, and determination, qualities that would carry her far in life. She was described as self-driven, someone who not only dreamed, but also worked tirelessly to make those dreams real. Athalia's journey took her into the U.S. Army, where she served honorably and rose to the rank of sergeant. She became a heavy equipment mechanic in the 2nd Infantry Division, a role that demanded strength, skill, and focus. Her time in service sent her across the world, exposing her to new cultures and challenges, while reinforcing her ability to endure under pressure. For Athalia, the military wasn't just a career, it was the foundation for the life she envisioned, one built on hard work, sacrifice, and devotion. After leaving the Army, Athalia settled in North Carolina, choosing the High Point and Jamestown areas to build her new life. She poured herself into her family and her community. Over the years, she became a small business owner, a certified life coach, a certified interior designer, and even a public notary for the state. She studied psychology at North Carolina A&T State University, pursuing education with the same drive that had fueled her military career. It was during these years of rebuilding her life that Athalia met the man who would eventually take everything from her. That man was the 45-year-old Robert Creighton Jr., who was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Now, in the beginning, nothing seemed out of place when it comes to Robert. He had ambitions of his own. From childhood, he was drawn to the stage, singing in choirs, appearing in small plays, and entertaining his relatives at family gatherings. Eventually, he pursued acting seriously, landing roles in projects like Let the Church Say Amen and The Game. He became known for his portrayal of Darwin, a quirky character, and thrived in the grind of auditions, rehearsals, and performances.
This is the U.S. Open of dirt track racing.
Okay, I don't care what you're saying. We're not gonna enter a race for the money.
Can we just hear what he's got to say?
Look, what I'm saying is the top 10 earners, they're in the big race automatically. The rest of them got to qualify the race. And your boy, he can drive.
This meeting between Athalia and Robert seemed like the beginning of something hopeful, though no one could guess how their story would one day end. Robert also did voiceover work, expanding his reach as an entertainer. He often spoke about loving the daily hustle, describing it as part of his devotion to his craft. For him, acting wasn't just work, it was his identity. On the surface, Athalia and Robert seemed like a couple who had built a good life together. She, the Army veteran and businesswoman, and he, the actor chasing Hollywood dreams. They built a home in High Point that reflected both her steady devotion and his artistic pursuits. To many, it looked like a promising union. But beneath that surface, shadows were beginning to form. Shadows no one could imagine would grow so dark. In time, their marriage brought children. They had 3 together, Nasir, Nyla, and Kasim. Life as parents seemed to deepen Athalia's purpose, but she was more than just a wife and mother of 3. She had 5 children in all, 3 sons and 2 daughters, and those who knew her said she lived for them. Her niece later described her as a mother who would go through hardship for a season to make sure her children flourish. Her children were not only her pride, but also her partners in her journey. She encouraged them to dream, to create, and to live with the same drive she embodied. And in turn, they loved her deeply, her presence described as a light in their lives. That love and light shined brightest with the support she gave in her eldest son, Kasim. At 18 years old, he was carving out his own path with a strong social media presence as an artist, sharing his work and building a following. Athalia often celebrated him openly, saying how proud she was of her eldest son, calling him her young king with a vision for his life. She would talk about how much effort he was putting in to succeed, reminding him that she supported him fully and unconditionally. Her words revealed not only her pride in her son, but also her constant encouragement, a glimpse into how she wanted all her children to believe in themselves because she always believed in them first. At first glance, their home looked like any other, a place filled with the ordinary rhythms of family life, work, and raising children. But over the years, troubling cracks began to appear. Inside what looked like a healthy, ordinary home, something darker was unfolding. The couple had their share of disagreements, like many do, but over time, those disagreements escalated into something far more dangerous. It reached the point where patrol cars became a familiar sight outside their door. Records show the police were called not once, but in 2014, 2016, 2019, and again in January 2022. Each incident seemed to pass, yet the pattern always returned, a cycle that quietly warned of deeper troubles still to come. But those repeated calls to the home hinted at something more than just arguments. Beneath the surface, a hidden struggle was slowly taking shape, one that would soon reveal just how fragile life inside that house had become. Robert's mental health had been worsening, and it wasn't a quiet battle. Family members knew he was unwell, and in early 2022, the situation reached a point where he was placed under an involuntary commitment order. This meant he was legally confined for mental health treatment against his will, usually after authorities determined that he was a danger to himself or to others. This wasn't just a small problem. It was a serious warning that Robert was losing control of his stability. Reports described how his behavior had grown unpredictable and concerning. And yet, after each episode, Life in the house seemed to carry on as if nothing had changed. The truth is, Robert's mental illness had been affecting the household for a long time. It wasn't something that came and went. It was always there, slowly changing how people talked to each other, how they reacted, and how they felt in their own home. Over time, it made arguments worse, made relationships harder, and made everyone feel on edge. His mental health didn't suddenly fall apart. It was a slow breakdown, one that people only realized was serious when it was already too late. Even though things would seem okay after each time the police were called, that feeling of danger never fully left. What neighbors and even family members may not have noticed was that these moments were part of a pattern, a warning that something truly awful was coming, but no one could have guessed just how bad it would get. Athalia loved her kids with all her heart. She worked hard to give them a good life, but living with Robert's unpredictable behavior was exhausting. The pressure was real. She kept chasing her dreams, kept being a good mom, but the warning signs were just getting worse. Without anyone realizing it, the situation inside their home was reaching a breaking point. Athalia was a strong woman. She had served in the military, built her own business, and was raising 5 kids with love and structure. But even someone as strong as she couldn't stop what was coming. Robert, who was once known for his acting talent and charm, was slowly losing himself to the darkness. And soon, everything would fall apart in a way no one in High Point would ever forget. On the morning of January 7th, everything came crashing down. That morning began like any other day, but inside Athalia's home at 2700 Mossy Meadow Drive, High Point, North Carolina, something terrible was already happening. Just after 7 a.m., one of Athalia's kids and another young kid ran out of the home and went to the neighbors, desperately begging for help. Their words were chilling. Their father had held a gun onto their head. But before he could even pull the trigger, the young man was somehow able to evade the looming anger and flee. That was when the harrowing 911 calls were received by the North Carolina police. The officers immediately rushed to the Athalia High Point home, hoping to calm the situation down. But what they didn't know was that something so disturbing awaits them at the crime scene. When officers entered the home, the scene was devastating. Athalia Athena Creighton, age 46, lay dead alongside 3 of her children. Each had been shot. The violence was overwhelming, the silence that followed almost unbearable. It was clear that this wasn't just another case of domestic trouble. This was something far darker. It was Robert Creighton Jr. who carried out the killings, and by the time police arrived, he too was dead. The gun turned on himself after he ended the lives of his family.
Afternoon with new details about that weekend murder-suicide in High Point. 5 people dead, including 2 children.
High Point police held a news conference this afternoon where they shared that information. WXII 12's Maria DeBone was there. And Maria, what can you tell us about this?
Well, Lindsay, officers responded Saturday morning to a home on Mossy Meadow Drive. When they got there, they said they found 2 people outside who escaped and said they needed help.
Investigators at first struggled to process the sheer scale of what they had walked into. Even veteran officers admitted they had never seen anything quite like it in their decades of service. As the investigation unfolded, authorities worked quickly to piece together the timeline. The 2 survivors who had escaped gave accounts that painted a terrifying picture. A night and morning filled with threats, fear, and finally, gunfire. Their escape had been the only chance to raise the alarm, but tragically, it came too late to save the others. Reporters soon gathered outside Mossy Meadow Drive. Police tape cordoned off the quiet street, and neighbors stood in shock, some holding back tears. This wasn't the kind of place where people expected to see an entire family wiped out in a single morning.
Never in anybody's wildest imagination could one imagine in their own neighborhood, a quiet, nice neighborhood, that something of this magnitude could happen. I just can't even imagine.
Yet now, it was reality. The High Point Police Department later confirmed what many already feared. Robert Creighton Jr. had killed his wife, Athalia, and 3 of their children, Nasir, Nyla, and Qasim, before killing himself. Qasim, just 18 years old, had been full of ambition, chasing his dreams as a young artist. Nyla and Nasir, both younger, were remembered as bright, full of life and deeply loved by their mother. Athalia herself was described as the center of the household, a woman who had devoted her life to her children and to her community. But as investigators dug deeper, the question remained, why? Why would a man once seen as a hardworking actor and father do something so unthinkable? Over time, police uncovered that this was not the first sign of trouble at the Creighton home. Past calls and incidents, including an involuntary commitment order in early 2022, painted a troubling history that pointed to Robert's declining mental health.
We just saw the father the day before, and he waved and said hello and to my doggies, and though we have been noticing some strange behavior by him, whoever could imagine anything like this?
It was a warning that had lingered in the background, but one that never stopped the tragedy from unfolding.
We may never know why. What goes through the hearts and minds of a person that would do this sometimes dies with them.
Tonight we know who died in a murder-suicide over the weekend, but not why. As you just heard from High Point Police Lieutenant Patrick Welch, we may never have the answer, but one thing we do know, a community is scarred.
The morning of January 7th showed just how dangerous those problems had become. The stress and anger that had built up in the Creighton home finally exploded into deadly violence. For investigators, trying to understand Robert's mind was just as important as collecting the physical evidence, but many admitted that the full truth of what he was thinking in those final hours may have died with him. The murders shocked the entire High Point. Press conferences followed, with officials confirming the details but struggling to explain the why. One officer said plainly that sometimes the reason dies with the person who committed the crime. It was a chilling reminder that not every tragedy has a clear answer. As the day wore on, the news spread far beyond North Carolina. Headlines carried the story of a Hollywood actor who had killed his wife and children before turning the gun on himself. For many, it was almost too much to process. How could someone who seemed so full of talent and promise become the center of such horror? And how could Athalia, a veteran, a businesswoman, and a mother loved by so many, end this way? The answers remained uncertain, but what was clear was that 5 lives were lost in a single act of violence, and an entire community was left forever changed. The funerals of Athalia and her children were moments of both heartbreak and remembrance. Friends, family, fellow veterans, and community members gathered to honor lives that were taken too soon. At the service, people spoke of Athalia's strength, her compassion, and the way she dedicated her life to her children and to lifting others in her community. Her children were remembered for their bright futures, for their kindness, and for the joy they brought into every room they entered. The grief was overwhelming, but so was the love on display as hundreds came together to support the surviving family members. Nationally, the case caught headlines. Robert Creighton Jr. was not just another husband or father, he was a known actor whose name brought even more attention to what had happened. But the spotlight did not focus only on him. It turned to Athalia, her accomplishments, her service, and her role as a mother who had given so much of herself to others. In her death, she became a symbol of resilience and love, a life remembered for far more than the way it ended. In the end, the case of Robert and Athalia Creighton left more questions than answers. It forced an entire city and even the nation to confront the reality that sometimes the greatest dangers lie behind closed doors. It showed the devastating consequences when mental illness and violence go unchecked. And it left a legacy of sorrow, but also of resolve, a call for better support, better protection, and a reminder that tragedies like this can happen anywhere. The story of Athalia, her children, and the violence that claimed their lives remains one of the darkest chapters in High Point's history. But in the face of loss, their memories endure, carried by those who refuse to let their light be forgotten.
Thank you for watching today's story on Shadow Truths, where every light casts a shadow and every truth has a darker side. If this story gripped you, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we bring you daily true crime stories that uncover the hidden, the shocking, and the unspoken. Stay tuned, because tomorrow's story might be even darker. This is Shadow Truths,